All right. Shall we now look at the implementation phase of the project? You know, remember previously we are looking at we have looked at project planning, how to plan the project, how to select the project, among others. Now, after you have carefully, okay, after you have carefully planned your project, you will be ready to start the project implementation phase. And this is actually the third phase of the product management life cycle. So the implementation phase actually involves putting the project plan into action. Yeah. So it's actually here where the manager will coordinate and direct project resources to meet the objectives of the project planning. So as the project unfolds, it's the project manager's job to actually direct and manage each activity. So every step of the way. So the implementation phase, that is what happens in the implementation phase of the project life cycle. So you follow the plan you have put together and handle any problems that can come afterwards. So the implementation phase is where you and your project team actually do the project work to produce the deliverable. Now, by deliverables, what we mean is that we refer to anything your project delivers, right? So the deliverables for your project would include all the products or services that you and your team are performing for the client, for the customer, or the sponsor. That would include all the project management document that you put together. So the steps undertaken to build each deliverable will vary depending on the type of the project you are undertaking. And it can actually not, therefore, be described here in any real detail. Now, your job as a project manager is to direct the work, but you need to do more than deliver the results, right? You also need to keep track of how well your team performs. The implementation phase actually keeps the project plan on track with careful monitoring and control processes to ensure the final deliverable meets the acceptance criteria, set by the customer actually. Now this phase actually, the phase is typically where approved changes are implemented, and most often changes are identified by looking at performance and the quality control data. So the routine performance and the quality control measurements should be actually evaluated on a regular basis throughout the implementation phase. So gathering reports on those measurements will help you actually to determine the problem, what a problem is, and recommend changes to fix it. What about change control? What about change control? When you find a problem, you can't just make a change because it may be too expensive or too long to do. So what you need to do, you need to look at how it affects the triple constraint, that is the time, the cost, and the scope, and actually how it impacts project quality. That is very, very important. You'll then have to figure out, if it is worth making the change or not. Now, once you evaluate the impact of the change and find that it won't have an impact on the project triple constraint, then you can make the change without going through the change control, right? You can just try to make that change. Now, the change control is a set of procedures that lets you make changes in an organized way. Okay, the change control is a set of procedures that lets you make changes in an organized way. Look, anytime you need to make a change to your plan, you must start with a change request. And this is actually a document that either you or the person making the request must complete. So any change to your project must be documented so you can figure out what needs to be done, when, and by who. Now, once the change request is documented, it is submitted to a change control board, right? Now, a change control board is a group of people who consider changes for approval. Not every change control system has a board, but most of them they do. They do have, right? So the change request could also be submitted to the project sponsor or the management for review and approval. Putting the recommended changes through change control will help you evaluate the impact and update all the necessary documents. So not all changes actually are approved, but if the changes are approved, you send them back to the team to put them in place. And that is what usually does happen. Now, when it comes to the issues of the implementation phase, here you use the most project. Here, the implementation phase uses the most project time and the resources. And as a result, costs are usually the highest during this phase. So the project managers also experience the greatest conflict over schedules in this phase. You may find actually as you are monitoring your project that the actual time it is taking to do the schedule work is longer than the amount of time planned, right? So when you absolutely have to meet the date, you are running behind. You can sometimes find ways to do activities more quickly by adding more resources to critical path. Yeah. Now, what is a critical path? This is very, very important for you to understand that we also have to consider the critical path now. Now, what is crashing? Look, a crashing, the schedule means adding resources or moving them around to bring the project back into line with the schedule. Now, the crashing always costs more and it doesn't always work. There is no way to crash a schedule without raising the overall cost of the project. So if the budget is fixed and you don't have any extra money to spend, you can't use this technique, right? So sometimes you have got two activities planned to occur in sequence, but you can actually do them at the same time. This is called the fast tracking the project, right? When you start fast tracking the project, simply means doing the two activities that can follow each other, do them at the same time, right? For example, on a software project, you might do both your user acceptance testing, UAT, and your functional testing at the same time, for example. Now, this is pretty risky, right? There's a good chance you might need to redo some of the work you have done concurrently. So crashing and fast tracking are schedule compression tools. Now, managing a schedule change means keeping all of your schedule documents up to date. That way, actually, you will always be comparing your results to the correct plan. Now, after the deliverables have been physically constructed and accepted by the customer, then a phase that follows is to review, right, to determine whether the project is complete and ready for closure. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, at least we have known how to implement now. So next time we'll have the last conversation to close this schedule, of project management. Thank you so much for coming.